Please start by dimming your lights and finding a comfortable position as we prepare to drift back through time into the shadowy streets of old London. Tonight we explore a time when the boundary between a cure and a curse was dangerously thin, and every doctor carried secrets in his heavy leather bag. Leave behind the frantic pace of the modern world as the distant sound of carriage wheels on wet cobblestones lulls you into a state of deep relaxation. In this era, physicians were regarded as the ultimate gentlemen, yet their well-meaning treatments were often more lethal than the very illnesses they were trying to cure. Welcome to a journey into the heart of Victorian medicine, a place of silent chaos where the shadows of the past hold many strange and dark stories. Take a deep breath and let the warmth of your surroundings settle over you like a heavy blanket while we begin our descent into medical history. The city was a labyrinth of fog and mystery, where the elite lived in luxury while doctors practiced their trade in the dim light of flickering oil lamps. Inside those bags lay tools that would make a modern patient shudder, used by men who believed they held the ultimate power over life and death. In the halls of the great Victorian infirmaries, the air was thick with the scent of lavender and rot, hiding the grim reality of the surgical theatre. As you listen, feel the calm of the present moment, contrasting with the unsettling practices we are about to uncover from the depths of the 19th century. The human body was still a vast, uncharted territory to the doctors of the time, a puzzle they tried to solve with archaic and often brutal logic. They studied ancient texts and followed traditions that had remained unchanged for centuries, even as the world around them began its rapid industrial and scientific transformation. Let us walk through the mist together, observing the silent houses where patients waited for the arrival of the local physician and his mysterious dark remedies. Time moved differently then, and for many the arrival of the doctor marked the beginning of a struggle far worse than the disease they suffered from. Each bottle contained a promise of health, but often they held ingredients that would be considered poison in our modern world of regulated and safe pharmacy. Life was fragile, and the pursuit of health was a desperate gamble against the unknown, played out in the quiet drawing rooms of the wealthy and poor. Knowledge was a flickering flame in a dark room, and the surgeons of the day were pioneers navigating a landscape of pain without any map or guide. The city itself was often a source of sickness, with its crowded streets and polluted waters providing a constant stream of patients for the medical profession. Step into the shoes of those who lived through this era, feeling the cold air and the heavy silence of a world without modern medical miracles. The apothecary was a place of magic and science combined, where herbs and minerals were ground into powders to ward off the many shadows of death. We are unlocking the cabinet of curiosities, peering into a past that is as fascinating as it is horrifying, where tradition reigned supreme over actual evidence. Now, as we settle into the story, let the atmosphere of the 19th century surround you, preparing your mind for the tales of medical madness ahead. The cornerstone of Victorian medical belief was the theory of the four humours, an ancient concept that suggested all illness came from a simple internal imbalance. They believed the body was a vessel of fluids, and if you fell ill, it meant one of these liquids was overflowing and needed to be removed. Blood was seen as the most powerful humour, often associated with heat and life, but also blamed for a wide variety of common and serious fevers. Phlegm was the cold and wet humour, thought to cause lethargy and respiratory issues if it was allowed to accumulate too much within the patient's chest. Black bile was the most mysterious and dreaded, believed to be responsible for deep melancholy and the darkening of the soul and the physical body alike. Yellow bile, on the other hand, was linked to anger and aggression, with doctors often seeking to purge it from the body to restore peaceful health. To restore the balance of these humours, the most common solution was as simple as it was brutal, involving the direct removal of the excess fluid. The use of leeches was a standard practice considered a gentle and natural way to draw out the bad blood that was supposedly causing the infection. These small creatures were kept in special jars and applied to the skin of the sick, where they would feed until they were swollen and satiated. Physicians believed that the leeches had an instinctive ability to find the exact spot where the blood was most congested, acting as living medical instruments. For many Victorians, the sight of a jar of leeches was as common as a modern thermometer, a sign that the healing process had finally begun. Leeches became so popular that they were nearly driven to extinction in parts of Europe, as millions were used every year to treat everything from headaches. But if leeches were not fast enough, the doctor would turn to more direct and aggressive methods to drain the patient's life-giving blood to restore balance. The lancet was the primary tool for venesection, a practice where a vein was opened to allow a significant amount of blood to flow out freely. By removing what they thought was excess blood, doctors were actually weakening the patient's immune system, making it much harder for the body to fight disease. Patients were often bled until they fainted, a state that doctors mistakenly interpreted as a sign that the treatment was working and the fever was breaking. This practice was used for almost every ailment imaginable, from the common cold to the most severe cases of pneumonia, or even physical trauma from accidents. Some devices, like the scarifier, could make multiple small cuts at once, allowing for a more controlled but equally misguided removal of the vital fluids. Cupping was another popular technique, where glass cups were heated and placed on the skin to create a vacuum that would pull blood to the surface. Wet cupping involved making small incisions first, so the vacuum would draw the blood out of the body and into the cup in a controlled manner. These tools were often kept in beautiful cases of wood and velvet, treated with the same respect as a master craftsman's most prized and essential instruments. The irony of the humour theory was that the very act of balancing the body often pushed it into a state of irreversible and fatal shock. In the mind of the Victorian physician, a clean patient was one who had been emptied of the toxic humours that were polluting their natural inner systems. The quiet confidence of these doctors was based on 1,000 years of tradition, making it nearly impossible for them to see the error of their ways. They saw themselves as gardeners of the human body, pruning the branches of life to ensure that the rest of the organism could survive the winter. But the pruning was often too deep, and many patients never recovered from the treatments that were supposed to save them from a premature and painful grave. The simplicity of the theory was its greatest strength, offering a clear and logical explanation for the chaotic and unpredictable nature of human illness and health. As the era progressed, new ideas began to emerge, but the belief in the humours remained a powerful and stubborn ghost in the halls of medicine. The atmosphere of the sick room was one of ritual and repetition, where the flow of blood was the primary measure of the doctor's skill and success. To the modern eye, these scenes looked like something out of a horror film, but to the Victorians, it was the height of scientific medical advancement. Precision was key, even when the underlying theory was completely wrong, leading to a strange disconnect between technical skill and actual healing results for patients. The pain of the treatment was often accepted as a necessary part of the cure, a trial that the patient had to endure to find health. Doctors truly believed they were helping, often working tirelessly through the night to drain the poison from the bodies of their most desperate and dying patients. The cost of these treatments was high, both in terms of money and physical health, yet the demand for bloodletting continued to grow throughout the early century. The authority of the physician was absolute, and few dared to question the ancient wisdom that dictated the removal of blood as a cure for everything. But beneath the surface of this certainty, the seeds of doubt were being sown by a few brave individuals who noticed that the bled patients died. The era of humour-based medicine was a long and dark night, where the primary weapon against death was the very fluid that kept the body alive. As the morning light of modern science began to rise, the jars of leeches and the silver lancets would slowly find their way into the museum. Beyond the draining of blood, the Victorian medicine cabinet was filled with substances that we now recognise as deadly toxins, often sold as miracle cures. Mercury and arsenic were the stars of this dangerous show, used both to treat the most intimate diseases and to achieve the perfect pale aesthetic look. Mercury, known as quicksilver, was the primary treatment for syphilis, a disease that haunted the streets and the high society bedrooms of Victorian London, with equal ferocity. The phrase "a night with Venus," "a lifetime with Mercury," became a tragic reality for thousands who sought a cure for their indiscretions through heavy metal. Patients would take so much mercury that their hair and teeth would fall out, their skin would erupt in rashes, and their minds would slowly descend into madness. Arsenic was another favourite, prized for its ability to produce a ghostly porcelain complexion that was the height of fashion for the upper-class Victorian woman. Women would eat arsenic wafers or apply lead-based makeup to hide any imperfections, unaware that they were slowly poisoning their bodies from the outside in. Even the walls were deadly. The popular Shields green pigment used in wallpaper and dresses was laced with arsenic, releasing toxic fumes into the damp air. Families would fall ill in their own homes, suffering from mysterious headaches and weakness, never suspecting that their beautiful decor was the silent and invisible killer. Arsenic was so ubiquitous that it was often mistaken for sugar or flour, leading to countless accidental poisonings in kitchens across the sprawling Victorian Empire. These poisons were marketed with beautiful labels and sold by reputable chemists, making them appear as essential tools for health, beauty, and domestic well-being. The body would leave clues of its struggle, but doctors often misdiagnosed the symptoms as other common ailments, leading to even more doses of the poison. The Victorian home was a minefield of chemical hazards, where the pursuit of cleanliness and style often came at the cost of long-term health and survival. Chemists would experiment with new compounds, often testing them on themselves or unsuspecting patients in a desperate race to find the next great medical breakthrough. Even the most powerful men in society were not immune, as they sought relief from their pains through the very substances that were destroying their internal organs. Beauty was a dangerous game, played with chemicals that modern science would only handle with lead-lined gloves and extreme caution in a controlled laboratory environment. The fragility of life was mirrored in the fragile glass that held these cures, each one a potential death sentence disguised as a helpful and restorative tonic. Precision was practiced even with poison, as if the correct dosage could somehow bypass the inherent lethality of substances like strychnine or belladonna in the blood. Belladonna, or beautiful lady, was used to dilate pupils for a wide-eyed, attractive look, even though it could lead to blindness and severe heart palpitations. The lead in their makeup would slowly seep into their bloodstream, causing brain damage and physical paralysis, while they admired their reflection in the silvered mirror. It was a slow-motion catastrophe, where the desire for social perfection led directly to a physical decline that was as agonizing as it was unavoidable. Nature provided the poisons, and the Victorians provided the market, creating a deadly synergy that defined the darker side of 19th century medical and cosmetic life. Warnings were few and often ignored, as the allure of the quick fix and the perfect face outweighed the distant threat of chronic and painful poisoning. The physical signs were everywhere, from the metallic breath of the mercury user to the trembling hands of the arsenic eater, hidden beneath fine silk gloves. They searched for the cause of illness in the unseen, yet they were often holding the very cause in their own hands every time they prescribed. Tonics containing opium and cocaine were sold over the counter, promising to soothe every nerve and cure every cough with a sweet and addictive embrace. The line between medicine and narcotic was blurred, with many patients finding themselves trapped in a cycle of addiction that started with a simple prescription. The relief was immediate, but the cost was a slow erosion of the self, as the toxins took hold of both the body and the mind. How many natural deaths were actually the result of the medicine cabinet? We may never know the true scale of the Victorian poisoning epidemic today. Every death was a mystery, every recovery a miracle, in a world where the very things meant to help were often the things that brought the end. Like mercury, the truth of their treatments was slippery and fragmented, hard to grasp even when the evidence was staring them right in the face every day. The doctors of the era were as much victims of their time as their patients, following the consensus of a scientific community that was still in infancy. As the light of chemistry grew brighter, the dangers became clearer, but the transition from poison to medicine would take many more decades of painful trial. The secrets of the Victorian pharmacy are a dark reminder of how far we have come and how much we have learned from our ancestors' mistakes. It stands as a testament to the endurance of the human spirit surviving even when the world around us is filled with beautiful and deadly illusions. The invisible nature of these poisons made them all the more terrifying, a threat that could be hidden in a cup of tea or a face. We leave the world of toxins now, moving toward the bright and bloody lights of the Victorian surgical theatre, where speed was the only form of mercy. In the Victorian era, surgery was not a quiet or sterile affair. It was a public spectacle, a theatre of pain held before an audience of students. Without anaesthesia, the only way to minimize the patient's agony was through sheer, blistering speed, turning the surgeon into a kind of high-stakes medical athlete. Seconds were the difference between life and death, or at least between a manageable level of pain and a complete fatal collapse of the human spirit. Robert Liston was the undisputed master of this era, known as the fastest knife in the West End, capable of incredible feats of rapid surgical skill. "Time me, gentlemen," he would shout to the crowd as he prepared to perform an amputation in a matter of seconds rather than long, agonizing minutes. His speed was legendary. He once amputated a leg in just 2.5 minutes, a feat that is almost impossible to imagine in today's world. But this speed came with a terrible risk, as the precision needed for a safe surgery was often sacrificed in the race against the ticking clock. In his haste, Liston once famously cut off the fingers of his own assistant along with the patient's limb, a testament to the dangers of speed. The atmosphere was thick with the scent of sawdust used to soak up the fluids and the heavy metallic smell of fresh blood in the air. There were no masks, no gloves, and no understanding of germs. The surgeon's bloody apron was a badge of honour, a sign of his immense experience. Infection was almost a certainty, and the period after the surgery was often more dangerous than the procedure itself, as surgical fever took many lives. Patients were held down by strong men, their screams echoing through the stone halls of the hospital, until they finally succumbed to the overwhelming physical pain. Each scratch on that table told a story of a struggle for survival, a testament to the resilience of the human body in the face of horror. The sound of the saw against bone was something no one ever forgot, a mechanical rasp that signalled the finality of the surgeon's decisive and quick work. Even the most hardened surgeons felt the weight of their profession, knowing that their best efforts often ended in the quiet silence of the morgue downstairs. Closing the wound was a secondary thought, done as quickly as possible to get the patient back to the ward where their true battle would finally begin. The survival rate was abysmal, but for many, surgery was the only hope they had left, a desperate gamble against an even more painful and certain death. Post-operative care was primitive, consisting of little more than changing bandages and hoping that laudable pus would appear as a sign of the body's healing. They were men of science in a world of mystery, doing their best with the limited tools and knowledge that their era had provided them with. The famous 300% mortality case of Robert Liston remains one of the most incredible and tragic stories in the entire history of the medical profession. In one operation, he accidentally killed the patient, his assistant, and a spectator who died of sheer fright, marking a dark pinnacle of surgical speed. It was a time when the speed of the hand was more valued than the cleanliness of the blade, a priority that would cost countless lives unnecessarily. The silence of the theatre today is a stark contrast to the noise and chaos that once defined it, a place of extreme suffering and triumph. The transition to modern surgery began with the discovery of ether and chloroform, but for decades the fast surgeons reigned as the kings of the hospital. The arrival of anaesthesia would eventually change everything, allowing surgeons to take their time and focus on precision and safety for the first time in history. But until then, the gentlemen of the knife continued their rapid work, leaving a trail of blood and legend behind them in the surgical theatres of London. These skeletons are the silent witnesses to an era of unthinkable endurance, where the human body was pushed to its absolute limits on the operating table. The apron remains as a symbol of the profession's gritty and brutal beginnings, a reminder of the price paid for the medical knowledge we have today. We move now from the theatre of the adult to the quiet and dangerous world of the Victorian nursery, where the medicines were just as lethal. The grip of the past is strong, and the stories of the surgical theatre continue to haunt our understanding of how medicine was once practiced in the dark. In the city's heart, the race for life was run every day, with the fastest men leading the way through a sea of blood and agonizing pain. Speed was the only mercy, and the ticking clock was the only judge in a world where the scalpel was the primary tool of hope and survival. The ritual of the theatre was over, but the memories of the speed and the screams would linger in the minds of those who were there. His name is etched in history, not for the lives he saved, but for the incredible and terrifying speed with which he performed his many legendary operations. In that reflection, we see the true cost of Victorian medicine, a mix of extreme bravery, profound ignorance, and the desperate pursuit of scientific progress at any cost. The table is cleared, the audience is gone, and the theatre falls into a long, deep silence that will eventually be broken by the birth of modern surgery. The edge of the blade was the edge of life, and the man who held it was both a hero and a nightmare to those he treated. The day begins again, but the ghosts of the surgical theatre remain, a part of the long and bloody history that brought us to where we are. In the quiet nurseries of Victorian England, a different kind of danger was lurking within the beautiful bottles of soothing syrups, sold to tired mothers. These syrups were marketed as a miracle for teething and colicky babies, promising to bring peace to the household and a long night's sleep for everyone. The secret ingredient that made these syrups so effective was not herbal or natural, but a potent and lethal combination of morphine and high-proof alcohol. The effects were immediate. The child would stop crying and fall into a profound drug-induced stupor that was often mistaken for a healthy and natural rest. Mothers were unaware that they were giving their infants a powerful narcotic, one that could easily lead to respiratory failure and a sleep from which they never woke. The soothers were so popular that they were sold in every corner shop and apothecary, becoming a staple of domestic life for families of all social classes. Doctors often saw infants who were emaciated and lethargic, suffering from chronic opium poisoning, but the syrups remained legal and widely available for many, many decades. Known by names like the baby killer among some critics, these products continued to be sold until the early 20th century when regulations finally took hold. The silence of the nursery was not always a sign of peace. It was often a sign of a dangerous suppression of the child's natural and vital instincts. Advertising played a huge role in the deception, using the image of motherhood to sell a product that was fundamentally anti-life in its very core chemical nature. The tragedy was that these parents truly believed they were doing the best for their children, following the advice of experts and the latest medical trends. The quiet child was the ideal of the era, and the syrups provided an easy, if deadly way to achieve that social standard of domestic tranquility. The dosages were unregulated, and it was easy to give a child far too much, leading to a state of coma that was often misdiagnosed as illness. She would never know that the medicine she was giving was a slow poison, eroding the health of her child one spoonful at a very tragic time. The physical toll was immense, but the psychological toll on the families who lost children to these syrups was a burden that lasted a whole lifetime. How many of these small graves were the result of a soothing syrup? The numbers are likely much higher than the historical records will ever truly show. The lullaby of the Victorian nursery was often a song of chemical sleep, a melody that brought a false sense of security to a very dangerous world. The true cause of death was often hidden, as the symptoms of an overdose were so similar to the diseases the children were supposedly being treated for. The realization of the danger was slow to come, but as more children fell victim, the medical community finally began to speak out against the syrup. It was the beginning of a long battle for drug regulation, a fight to protect the most vulnerable members of society from the greed of manufacturers. The M on the block could stand for many things, but in the Victorian nursery, it was often a symbol of the silent and deadly narcotic lurking. The joy of a healthy child waking up was the ultimate reward, a reminder of the precious nature of life that must be protected from such harms. Nature provided the beauty, but it also provided the ingredients that were so easily misused by those who sought a quick and easy solution to pain. The world was changing, and with it, the understanding of what it meant to care for a child, moving away from the dangerous remedies of the past. As the door to the Victorian nursery closes, we are left with the echoes of a time when the pursuit of sleep was a dangerous and deadly game. The innocence of the children was the greatest tragedy of the era, caught in a medical system that had not yet learned the value of true safety. The heat of the era's medical experiments was felt most by those who had no voice, the infants who were subjected to the latest chemical trends. Reading these journals today is a heartbreaking experience, knowing the true nature of the peace that the mothers were so happy to find for their babies. The dolls were a reflection of the era's ideal quiet, still, and perfectly behaved, even if that behaviour was the result of a powerful and lethal narcotic. We leave the nursery behind, carrying the lessons of the past into our own world, where the safety of our children is our most sacred and vital duty. Protection is the core of medicine, a lesson that was learnt the hard way through the many tragedies of the Victorian era's misplaced and dangerous trust. The darkness of the past is a reminder of the light we have found, a journey from the soothing poisons to the safe and effective cares of today. Every light in a window was a promise, a hope that the night would pass and the morning would bring a new and healthy day for everyone. The morning brings a fresh perspective, a chance to see the world as it truly is, free from the illusions of the soothing poisons of history. The sound of a child's laughter is the best medicine, a natural and beautiful sign of health that no syrup could ever hope to replicate or replace. We move on now, moving away from the nursery and toward the halls of the hospital, where the doctors themselves were the greatest source of danger. The next chapter of our story is one of pride and prejudice, where the simple act of washing hands was seen as a grave and insulting gesture. Water is the symbol of life and cleanliness, but in the Victorian hospital, it was often ignored in favour of the dignity of the medical gentleman's hands. For the Victorian physician, a blood-stained coat was a badge of experience, a sign that he was a busy and successful man of the medical world. The idea that invisible germs could cause disease was considered a joke, a bizarre theory that challenged the dignity and the perceived cleanliness of gentlemen. Ignaz Semmelweis was the first to notice the connection, seeing that mothers died in horrific numbers when treated by doctors who had just come from autopsies. He begged them to wash their hands in a simple chlorine solution, but his pleas were met with ridicule, anger, and eventually his own professional and mental ruin. The simple act of washing could have saved millions of lives, but the pride of the medical establishment was a barrier that few were able to cross. A gentleman's hands are always clean was the common refrain, a belief that proved fatal for the countless patients who sought help from these gentlemen. They couldn't see the enemy, so they chose to believe it didn't exist, even as the bodies piled up in the wards and the cemeteries of London. Joseph Lister would later take up the cause, using carbolic acid to sterilise surgical instruments and wounds, finally bringing the era of gentlemanly filth to an end. The scent of carbolic acid became the new smell of hope, a sharp and chemical aroma that signalled the arrival of modern, sterile and safe surgical practices. It took decades for the medical world to accept the truth, a period of transition that was marked by fierce debate and many unnecessary preventable deaths. The change was not just about water and soap, but about a fundamental shift in how doctors viewed their own role in the transmission of various diseases. Cleanliness became a duty rather than a choice, a standard that transformed the hospital from a place of certain death into a place of true healing. Science finally triumphed over pride, as the evidence of the microscopic world became too overwhelming for even the most stubborn and traditional physicians to ignore. The realization that they were the carriers of death was a heavy burden to bear, but it was the only way to move forward into the light. The ripple effect of these simple changes was immense, leading to a dramatic drop in mortality rates and a new era of trust in medical science. We look back on the Victorian era with a mix of horror and fascination, grateful for the brave men who dared to challenge the dangerous status quo, The simple act of washing our hands is a legacy of those early battles, a ritual that we now perform without even a single second thought. The old symbols of experience were destroyed, replaced by the clean white coats that we now associate with medical authority and modern scientific safety and care. Cleanliness is the foundation of our modern world, a lesson that was paid for with millions of lives during the dark and filthy Victorian-era hospital. The era of the gentlemanly doctor who refused to wash is over, a relic of a time when pride was more important than the patient's actual survival. As we conclude our journey through the horrors of the past, take a moment to appreciate the safety and the cleanliness of our own modern world. The purity of water is a gift, a tool of health that was once ignored but is now our first line of defense against the unseen enemy. The history of medicine is a long and winding road filled with mistakes and breakthroughs that have shaped the way we live and heal today. The transition is complete. From the dark and bloody theatres of London to the bright and sterile rooms of our contemporary hospitals and clinics for all, we have moved from a place of fear to a place of trust, from the shadows of ignorance to the bright and clear light of science. The city is a different place now, a testament to the progress we have made in our understanding of health, disease, and the human body itself. The night is no longer a time of danger, but a time of rest, protected by the medical miracles that we often take for granted every day. Sleep soundly knowing that the soothing syrups and mercury cures of the past are long gone, replaced by medicines that are safe, tested, and truly effective. We are the beneficiaries of a long and painful struggle, the heirs to a scientific legacy that has been built on the lessons of the past. As we look to the future, we carry the memories of the Victorian era with us, a reminder of the importance of evidence, humility, and care. We have come to the end of our journey through the Victorian medical world, a journey that has shown us the dark depths of human error. But it has also shown us the incredible resilience of the human spirit and the power of science to overcome even the most deep-seated and prideful traditions. We are lucky to live in a time when a trip to the doctor is a source of relief, rather than a source of unimaginable and agonizing fear. Now, as the story ends, let the lessons of the past drift away, leaving you in a state of calm and deep, restful and safe relaxation tonight. The shadows of the Victorian era have been banished by the light of modern medicine, leaving us with a world that is safer and healthier than ever. Time has moved on, and we have moved with it, leaving behind the miracle cures that were actually deadly poisons disguised as helpful and restorative medical tonics. Think of the progress we have made, the lives that have been saved, and the suffering that has been avoided thanks to the scientific method and care. Nature is a source of life, and when we understand its secrets, we can find true health and true peace for ourselves and for those we love. As you drift into sleep, let your mind rest on the beauty of our world and the knowledge that we are protected by the miracles of science. The struggle of the past is over, and the rest you find tonight is well earned and safe, far removed from the horrors of the Victorian medical theatre. We have locked the cabinet of Victorian curiosities, leaving the leeches and the mercury behind in the shadows of history, where they belong for all time. May your dreams be filled with light and hope, and may you wake up feeling refreshed and ready for a new and healthy day in the world. We are not alone in our journey, and the care we give to each other is the most powerful medicine of all in our beautiful modern world. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the dark and fascinating history of Victorian medicine, a journey that has come to its peaceful end. The rhythms of the past are gone, replaced by the steady and reliable pulse of modern science and the care that we all deserve and receive. We are always learning, always growing, and always moving toward a better and safer future for everyone who seeks the help and care of medicine. Let the calm of this moment settle into your bones, preparing you for a night of deep and restorative rest, free from all the past's shadows. The light of the past is gone, but the light of the present is bright, guiding us toward a morning that is full of promise and health. Rest now, and know that you are safe, protected by the knowledge and the care that has been built on the trials of those who came before. The past is a memory, and the future is a gift, a chance to live a healthy and long life in a world of medical miracles. We leave you now with the promise of a safe and peaceful sleep and a healthy morning that is waiting just for you and for everyone. May your rest be deep and your dreams be far removed from the shadows of the past as you sleep soundly in our modern safe world.